All right, we're recording now. So welcome everyone to this portal's community call. I'm going to hand things off to Nick Hayden.
All right, thank you, Jason. Yes, thanks everyone for attending here. The last community call of the year. 2020 is almost over, thankfully. I'm excited about what we have to show you today. We've got another guest presenter this month. We've got Franco, who has built a spectacular looking portal that looks kind of nothing like any of the other portals. The question I get all the time, hey, can you give me examples of portals that don't look like all the other portals that we've ever seen? This is going to be a great example of that. Okay, I just got to change one setting here. All right. All right, quick intro. My name is Nicholas Hayden. If you've never been on one of these calls before, the rest of you are probably sick of hearing this, but I'm Nicholas Hayden, President Software Engineer with Engineered Code Consulting, Inc., Microsoft MVP, and I've been doing portals for a long time, basically my whole career, having started off with ADX Studio. If you're interested in connecting on social, there's my LinkedIn, I've got Twitter, I've got a blog, I've got YouTube channel where we're posting videos about portals. We've got the portals podcast that we do called Refresh the Cache, all that good stuff. So please do, you know, if you're wanting to, please reach out to me on any of those social media channels, and always happy to connect. All right. All right. Next slide here. So do want to, as always, express my gratitude and appreciation for the good folks at MMs Dynamics World, Jason Guppert and his team, for supporting us and you know, getting the word out, hosting the call, all that sort of stuff. So they make this all possible. So really appreciate their assistance. Now, in terms of our agenda, we've got a little bit of news to cover. We've got some interesting kind of community content that I wanted to highlight. And then we will get into what Franco learned building a Spotify clone using Power Apps portals. We'll talk about the date and time of our next portals community call, and then there'll be time for some question and answer. If you've got any or all portals related questions, happy to tackle those. All right, so let's get into our portals news. So the first thing is there is a, you know, this feature has been around maybe a little bit longer than a lot of people realize, because it wasn't, the feature was available and then the announcement came a few weeks later, but it is now possible to manage web page access control rules in Portal Studio. So rather than having to do that using the model-driven app, you can now do that in Portal Studio. Let me see if I can give you a quick example of how that looks here. So if I go into my portal and I click the edit button, see if this will load up for me today. Getting things ready. I've got 9 days left in my trial, it says. You'll see here, even as the screen is loading, we've got this permissions area that is new. So now you can't do absolutely everything you could do with you know, web roles and a bunch of different things in the model-driven app. But you'll see that if we go to a page, we can now say, is this page available to everyone? Now, I'm not going to kind of wreck my home page with this, so let me go to, let's say, the sitemap. If I won't go to the sitemap, flip over to that. If I say, no, I don't want this available to everyone, I can check that off to no. And what that's doing is it's creating the necessary web page access control rules for that. I can say, does this permission apply to child files? That's typically used to restrict access to the home page. And I can say, which of these roles can I see this with? So administrators, authenticated users, all these different things in here. So again, this isn't new functionality in terms of, like, you could still do this, but rather than doing it through the portals management app or the Dynamics 365 portals model-driven app, you can now do it directly in Portal Studio. So something kind of a new feature that was announced as part of the release wave and is now available. So I thought I'd highlight that. Beyond that, we've got a session from one of my favorite people in the world, Mr. Nick Dolman. He presented recently at the Maple Power conference, which was a conference that was open to everyone, but I think all the speakers were Canadian, or had some sort of ties to Canada. So Nick Dolman did a session about alternate portal solutions for Dataverse. So if you're not familiar with the new technology or the new terminology for Dataverse, Dataverse is what used to be known as CDS, and so he essentially had a session that wasn't Power Apps portals, but maybe another way of building out a portal solution for Dataverse. So if you're interested in portals, and you're looking at Power Apps portals and you're seeing what else is out there, a great session to go check out there on YouTube. Another piece of community content that I want to highlight was Megan V. Walker's blog series on Microsoft Clarity. I haven't really used Microsoft Clarity. It is kind of this new service about kind of gathering information about the people who are on your website. And obviously, if it works on a website, the idea is, does this work with Power Apps portals? And so Megan has a bunch of kind of blog posts specifically about Microsoft Clarity, and then she's got one that kind of ties. She's done a lot of Power Apps portals stuff in her career, and she's got a bunch of content on it. So it was nice to kind of tie her newfound appreciation for Microsoft Clarity with the Power Apps portal stuff that she does. So definitely worth checking that out and learning more about Microsoft Clarity as well. Next we have, I use the word scheme here on purpose. So a publishing cycle scheme by George Dubinski. So if you're using Power Apps portals for any sort of even minor content management capabilities, you'll probably quickly run into the fact that there's no way to put a page into draft and yet still have the previous version of that page visible on the portal. If you put a page into draft, that page just simply disappears from the portal. There's only kind of one version of that page. It's either in draft or published. If it's in draft, it's not visible to the people who don't have the ability to view those things. What George has come up with is a scheme that is almost out of the box. It involves one or two flows that he's got. But what his technique is to create a portal of a different language. So the portal has these multilingual capabilities. So his scheme is he basically has for every page, there's like the main public version, and then there's a version of the site that's in another language. He calls it, I think, Blork or whatever he calls his other language. And the idea is that you can, as an administrator, flip between those languages, and you're essentially flipping between the draft and the public version of those pages. So you have your second language where everything's in draft, you edit your content, you can see it by switching to that other thing as an administrator, and then when you're ready to publish that, this is where he's built out a Power Automate flow to actually swap the records. So you swap the draft and the published. So it's quite an ingenious scheme, definitely worth, if you've ever kind of needed some additional publishing capabilities within Power Apps portals. George is one of the smartest guys I know. If he says that it's working for him and his team, it's something worth considering. So just thought I would share that. It's on CRM Tip of the Day. One of the, if you're not familiar with CRM Tip of the Day, that's also something worth checking out, run by a few MVPs. So definitely check out the publishing cycle and his publishing scheme for Power Apps portals. All right, and that's kind of what I wanted to cover in the news today. Just double checking. Oh, look, we've got someone on the call here. This Megan Walker person is posting a question on here. So glad to see you on the call, and I'll send you an invoice for the plug on your blog. All right, next, let's get to our why you're all here, and that is to learn all about how Franco built out a Spotify clone using Power Apps portal. So Franco, do you want to kind of jump on and introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. Good morning, good day, good evening, everybody. Just get my screen shared. Okay, you should see some cheesy photographs right about now. So that's me, Franco Musso. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just said, yeah, we can see your screen, so go ahead.
All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, so that's me, Franco Musso, Dynamics functional consultant, citizen developer, and lover of portals, Power Automate, Power BI, and all things Power Automate. Power Platform, especially the community. I'm an aspiring nerd, so I'm not a programmer, I'm not a CSS expert, I'm no means a front-end developer or anything like that. I'm a tinkerer, and my background, I'm coming to this from an end user training perspective. So I started off as a Dynamics trainer. I kind of became the conduit between the end users and the development team, and kind of got very comfortable in both camps and wanted to get in on the design of things. So that's kind of my route into Dynamics and then into the wider Power Platform via Power Automate, pretty much. I'm a failed online course creator so far, at least, likewise with blogging and writing. So I love to train people in person and terrible at sitting in front of an empty screen and writing something. So I'm envious of yourself, Nicholas, Megan Walker, and all you selfless people that put yourselves out there all the time, share that epic content. I hope to follow suit before too long. So as I said, not a coder, not a designer, not a CSS expert, and not even remotely a good dancer, but I love music and I love festivals. So one of the albums that will feature on my Spotify clone is Standing on the Shoulder of Giants by Oasis, and to that theme, I'd like to give a few thank yous out. Megan V. Walker is mentoring me at the moment, so this is kind of a light version of a session I'll be delivering at Scottish Summit that's still in development. Megan's been kind enough to mentor me and give up a lot of her time to help me get to where I am at the moment. And I'm sure a lot of these superstars will have come past already: Nick Dolman, Nicholas Hayden, Jim Novak, John Levesque from the Power Automate side of things, and everything I know pretty much, if I haven't got it from those, it's from online conferences, which I'm absolutely in love with at the moment. So everything we're about to see is my Spotify clone. Perhaps just a little bit of background on that. It is a byproduct. It's not something I actually set out to build, which is probably a bit of a strange thing to share. And it's been a welcome distraction, but it originally came around because I was trying to get my daughter, Armed and Dangerous, to work a Saturday job for me. And I needed to get across the concept of data models, tables, field types, and what have you. And after a few failed attempts, I noticed she was too busy messing around on her phone using Spotify. I thought, well, I'll relate that. I'll make it relatable. The data model we'll build is Spotify. So I can show her what views mean, what tables are, what forms are in the context of Spotify. I happen to have a portal project that came along, so I married the two together. So it started off by teaching my daughter, and then lots of things that I wondered if you could do with the portal and don't like to be told you can't do something with Dynamics or the Power Platform. So I've tried to give myself at least one unique challenge or one new feature per page of the portal. So it all starts with CDS, so we're now known as Dataverse. I'll quickly show you through the model-driven app, but I'm quite sure that's not the bit that you're going to be very excited about. So we've got really three audiences for this project. So in theory, we've got the Songify staff that will come in, administer record labels, maybe do some work on behalf of record labels, retire songs, manage licenses and what have you. Then there's the record label staff. So they've got one particular login for the portal, one web role that allows them to do things like come in and upload new tracks. So there's an interface for them. So this green bar we see across the top of the screen with the option to upload new tracks. And I'll be adding most things to that, like managing artists and managing the catalogue, adding tour dates and that kind of thing. And then of course we've got the listeners. So when a listener logs into the portal, they see a different set of options. So they've got customer facing homepage. Already a few challenges on this. Like I say, I'm not a CSS or JavaScript expert by any means. So something like just being able to filter images, do some hover effects, that was something new for me on the portal. Get signed in to ADB2C, which I learned from a video of Nick's. And give you a quick tour of the portal. What we've got going on then, see my profile page as standard as I log in, as you're probably used to if you've used the starter portal at all. First challenge was trying to style this without having access to the web template. So a little bit of tinkering that I've done, which perhaps come back to and make a little bit more sense of later. But anyone that's used WordPress to do any styling of that will love the body class. So that gives you all kinds of classes that you can hook onto for unique styling. So based on maybe what entity type we're looking at, which template we're looking at, which page we're on, specific to the portal, has it got an entity list, an entity form, all that kind of thing. So I've added that in to the body class. So I know at a glance that I'm looking at the profile page. It's not got a specific record GUID that I'm editing in the URL. It hasn't got an entity form, it hasn't got an entity list, and it hasn't got a web form. But I've used that with some styling to say, in this example, I want to specifically style the profile page body differently to the body of any other page on the site. So we go ahead and look at some content. All of this, we said, it is based on data in CDS in Dataverse. So the images are all note attachments, and these are all things that I've liked as a listener on the Songify portal. So I've got the playlist that I've liked, the artists, the albums, and I can navigate to any of those if I want to take a look. And that takes me to the first bit that I wanted to recreate from Spotify, and that was this blurred background, which I don't know why, I just found it fascinating. So that again is a note attachment from CDS. So it's taking this playlist artwork, blowing it up in the background and blurring that out. And we've got a playlist plugin. So I won't pretend to have done the clever work behind that, but I'm leveraging a jQuery plugin, which I can share in the comments afterwards. I can't actually remember the name of it, which isn't the best plug. But what we've got going on again is all the images and note attachments in Dynamics, including right down to these little thumbnails, which I'll come back to later. And when I go to play a track, that again is going to be pulling a file from my note attachments within Dynamics for that particular track. I've not ripped off anybody's audio, but just as an example, I've put some royalty-free music on there. So I can play the tracks. Not quite as exciting as Live Forever by Oasis, but proves a point. We can skip between the tracks, pause them, all that good stuff. And I can like the playlist, if I hadn't already, using the Portal Web API. So I've been tinkering with this portal for that long that the Portal Web API didn't exist when I first started to cobble it together. But now I've replaced that, one example being that I wanted to provide that like button experience that doesn't require a form or any complicated work behind the scenes. One of the challenges I faced along the way there was just how do we provide some visual feedback? So if I click like, you'll see on success. So that's now written back to Dynamics, created a like record associating my contact record with that particular playlist. and on the success, I've used jQuery just to change the content of that button. So time permitting, that's something we'll see later on, give you a sneak peek into the web templates. Okay, moving on to the next template is liked songs. So a couple of unique challenges here, or at least unique to me. First of all, I wanted to mimic another CSS effect from Spotify, which is blending that image into a gradient with transparency, and also to use some filters on those images. So for example, that particular image, so I've lost which element I put it in actually, but that is a colored image, and I've used CSS just to turn that into grayscale and have the gradient blend into it. And that, again, probably no surprise, is just a note image within note attachment within Dynamics. If I wanted to, I can unlike any of these or remove the light, whatever we want to call that. So if perhaps I've done live forever to death and just hit the icon again without the need for going filling in a form, that record's now deleted from Dynamics. Respecting my my entity permissions, I have set up with delete rights for those light records, and that's done. So hopefully comes across as very low friction. And moving on to playlists. In fact, sorry, we've seen playlists, haven't we? To probably get the sense for why one of the items are in my wish list for the roadmap for this portal, and that is smushing the images. So I'd like to just optimize them for this resolution and get that loading time down a little bit. So on to another template. My challenge with this one, a couple of things really. First was to use blend modes, which I've used on the menu here, to try and take on the look and feel of that main banner image. So what it turned out I needed to do for that, which again we'll take a look at in the web templates, is to pull out the average color of an image, which is something I'd never heard of or imagined doing before. It only really came to light when I was trying to mimic what the very talented designers at Spotify had done. And notice when I listen to tracks on Spotify on Apple CarPlay that we've got things like that average color and picking out the most dominant color from an image, and that'll bleed into other UI elements and be used in transparent things like that menu bar. So another theme that I've covered off in my slides is graceful degradation. Not a term that I use every day, but I believe that's the correct term for it. And that is to cover things like, what if a track doesn't have artwork associated with it? Well, we don't just want to show a not found image. We don't just want to show hundreds of lines of alt text. We didn't want the alt text to spill out into other areas of the page. So again, something to keep in mind when you're developing any custom templates for the portal, that you're using your if statements, double checking that, for example, does it have artwork attached? If there is a file attached, is it the correct MIME type? If there's a title, perhaps we want to consider truncating that with Liquid. We don't want a track name 12,000 characters long, all that good stuff. The unique challenge on the next page, you might notice when I refresh the page, the background changes. So I thought that might be a nice idea to use. I'd seen that Liquid had a random function, but never particularly had a use for it. So what I've got in that case is my retrieve list of albums, just pull out one by random, use its artwork as the background image for that page. And similar to what we saw with the playlist, I can drill into that, do the record in detail, and I've got the playlist just like I did. Oh, sorry, I've got the player just like I did with the playlist. So we'll get into how some of this has been put together in just a moment. Just a few final elements. So we've got the tool for creating a playlist. So this is quite a highly restyled web form. So the first web form step, I can choose a name for that playlist. Move on to the next step. Where I've got my subgrid that I can actually start to add some tracks to this now. So this again is sticking to the constraints really of the out-of-the-box tool, web forms in this example, where the playlist has got to exist before I can associate any tracks with it. So what I've got on the roadmap is to replace that with Portal's web API and just have that all happen as one screen. So really, as you probably have got the sense of from a lot of the announcements, it really lets us break free of the out-of-the-box UI components. So I'll add a track or two. And as you can imagine, just continue just with the usual web form metadata there, specifying what it is I can do with that list. Do I want to reorder items? Do I want to remove them? All that good stuff. And finally, go ahead, complete that, create the playlist. And then finally, see a little bit that I've done with the Portal's web API, which, like we mentioned before, is from a record label administrator point of view. So this first page is just bog standard web form. So what's the new track called? Who's that featuring? That's definitely something I underestimated when I was putting the data model together. So I thought of the ability to put a featured artist as well as a main artist. And then some of the bands that I love, such as Rudimental in the background, it turns out that they've got tracks with maybe 5 or 6 different featured artists on. So certainly have to stretch that out a little bit in future. I'm going to say the remix of that is explicit. Then we get on to probably the least exciting part, but an absolute fundamental of my Portal build, and that's the naming convention back in Dynamics. So in order to use those note attachments as artwork or as audio, I'm using a note with a very particular name. So what I'm doing on this particular page is I'm using the Portal Web API to upload artwork to a very specifically named note regarding that track, and likewise an audio file to a specifically named note within Dynamics regarding that track, which I'll show you in just a moment. Then choose the artwork, upload that. Again, on success, I'll just get the little tick icon. Probably come up with something better than that in the future, but some kind of visual feedback that something has happened. my audio file's bigger than what the image was, so it might take a moment or two. Yeah, so that's completed. Submit that. And let's see how that looks within Dynamics. So now within my model-driven app, in fact, it's not Dynamics, it's just a model-driven app. Alter tab, it's saying Dynamics. So there's the track I've just created. Portal's web API, I must say, I absolutely love it. So that has managed to, it took me a while to get there, I must say, not being a programmer, but I was able to create the track, relate it with setting two lookup fields with bindings, which I'll perhaps show if we get time to do that. And there are the files that I uploaded. So specifically to my note called audio, and specifically with the text that makes that visible to the portal, and likewise with my artwork. So I mentioned earlier that with the artwork, a pet peeve of mine from other websites is where you take ages loading the tiniest of images and fire up DevTools and you realize that in fact it's about a 10 megapixel photo and it's just been scaled down to 80 pixels by 80 pixels or something ridiculously small like that. So what I did with Power Automate, I've not actually got this switched on and running since I've deployed to yet another trial environment. But in case you haven't heard of it, I'm using an API from Encodian that will allow me to resize images automatically. So each time a note attachment's updated that happens to be called artwork. So it checks first of all that there is an attachment, then that it's a note called artwork, and then it'll send that file to the Encodian API, translate that from base64 to binary, which I'll admit I have absolutely no idea what that means, but I knew I had to use it. And then how small do I want to shrink that? So again, this could have been a 10 megapixel, 20 megapixel original professional image from the record label, and I just want to create a low res rendition of that, so it's nice and quick on the portal. And then what that'll do, depending on the type of, the entity that was relating, so regarding, in this example, a track. Create a note attachment with that file. Get the contents of that. Use the returned image that's come from the Encodian API, create a new note. In fact, that's out of date, that's now 200 pixels. And update that entity. So the reason for this is I'm just trying to save myself a bit of time. What I'm doing is to reduce the number of queries and simplify the FetchXML that I need to use is for every one of those tracks. Once the artwork and the audio files are set, I'm just copying the GUID locally. So that's saving me from then having to do related queries. So here's one to get the tracks. And then now we've got the track, go ahead and try and find out, go and try and retrieve the file called audio, the attachment called audio and the attachment called artwork. So that just allows me to simplify things and go and use a GUID instead. And then the light that we created, and just a very simple entity within Dynamics, we've set that up to be able to work for tracks, albums, artists, or playlists. And it's related to one particular listener, one particular customer. And I think that is just about it in terms of the portal functionality. So for all the things I found very exciting to work on along the way, behind the scenes, there are some just very, very run-of-the-mill bog standard things in place to make that work. Like, for example, having a naming convention, which I'm one of the many people that rolls their eyes when people talk about the likes of naming conventions and the importance of things like that, but it just made everything predictable and that bit easier. So I would say 4 liquid skills to rule them all, 4 really that helped me put that entire portal together, that helped me break free of the mold of entity forms, entity lists, web forms, and the classic look and feel of a portal. So the first being the entities object, letting us get an entire record in exchange for a GUID. I can show you that in context in some of our web templates, but definitely one to get familiar with. And the other being the FetchXML tag. So that really is about bringing out the big guns. That means any skills that you've got with Advanced Find already, or perhaps you can use the FetchXML builder tool in XRM Toolbox. But we can then query anything that we want to within Dataverse and surface that on the portal. So my experience with that was starting off with a bootstrap snippet, like for example, I want a thumbnail to appear on the portal, right? That's easy to do with static HTML and CSS. How do I pipe in some dynamics data? Cool, I can do that. Now let's parameterize it. So perhaps I want to base my query on the GUID that I've got in the URL. And then big power to the for loop. So repeat something as many times as I want. So at this stage, I just have the one thumbnail, one static thumbnail, then I had one dynamic thumbnail, and then with the for, that allows me to repeat that however many times I want. So either for all the records that are in a data set, or perhaps I'll use my my top count within FetchXML to say, just bring me the 5 most recent or the 10 most popular, or whatever the case may be. Then we have the ability to check things with ifs. So some examples mentioned already, check whether artwork is populated, check the MIME type of an attachment, check that we have the title. All that kind of thing sounds very basic and it's repetitive at times, but it just secures that great user experience for the end user. And a bonus to me, as I mentioned, I used the random function within Liquid. So that was from the list of albums, take the artwork from one of those albums, use that as a background each time that screen's loaded. So perhaps if you've seen entities and FetchXML within Liquid, you might have some questions about when you would use one versus the other. So my rule of thumb, if you're retrieving a single record and you know the GUID, entities all day long, that's the one to use, because you can basically do all that in one line of code. So I just say, again, I'll show you my web template examples, but entities tag the GUID that I pulled from the URL, and I've got full access to that record then. So where we would use FetchXML, so perhaps obvious is the retrieve multiple. So I get as many records as I want that match my criteria. But at times I've also used that for a retrieve single as well. So if I want to pull back a single record, but I don't know which record that is, I don't know the GUID, I just want, for example, not specifically Oasis's Live Forever, but I want the most recently liked song or the most recently played song. So I can enter my criteria. I can say I just want a count of one record, but I don't know which record that is. FetchXML is doing that hard work for me. So if you know the GUID, retrieve single, use entities. If you don't know the GUID, you want to use some other criteria and potentially retrieve multiple records, it's FetchXML. So I mentioned pulling the GUID from the URL. So this piece of Liquid will allow us to do that, request.params.id. So by default in the URL, wherever I've had access to a particular GUID, so for example, when I was viewing an album, this is what that's talking about. So question mark ID equals this GUID. So request.params.id was saying get the URL query string parameter called ID, and then I've got access to this. What I'm referencing here with whatever you choose to pass is you can actually add whatever you want as URL query string parameters in the portal and retrieve those with Liquid just by name. So I've used that in other portals for all kinds of things. So once you've got used to having that capability, you'll see it opens up all kinds of possibilities. And then part and parcel with all of that I tend to use with all my Liquid templates is assigning things to a variable for reuse. So in this example, in future when I'm referring to the GUID of the track, I can just use the term of the word track. So I take that GUID from the URL and I'm assigning it to a variable called track. Graceful degradation, I think we've covered that along the way really, but those are some real life things that I've encountered along the way. So I've had lots of image not found errors in my templates where artwork hadn't been attached yet, where I'd perhaps accidentally added audio to the artwork note and the other way around, where track names were just too long for the UI that I'd given them, and where the image is just the wrong type of file. So I can blame the user, me being the user in this example. I'd uploaded a spreadsheet of images rather than the image itself. Size is another good bit to know within Liquid. So that's where we can check the length of particular pieces of content. So maybe we want to check that a text field is populated or is over a certain length, and only if it is will we take any action. So I'm happy to dig into any of my web templates to see Liquid snippets. For the full-on version of this session that will be running at Scottish Summit, I will promise Megan I will have a website up and running with articles with all my useful Liquid snippets used for the portal. Still behind on that one. Okay, so styling with CSS. Sometimes I've used jQuery for that. So where possible, I've just done it with CSS, but if I've, for example, not got access to a particular web template with the out-of-the-box starter portals, then perhaps I've applied some jQuery, or if it's something that I'm doing interactively, like as a result of something that's just happened with a portal web API, I want to hide a certain element, I want to change the color of something, I want to point it out on screen, I can do that with jQuery. But I would say if you're just getting started taking your CSS to the next level, get used to mastering data attributes. They really help pinpoint specific elements within your portal HTML. So just show you a quick example of what I'm talking about there. Apologies if I'm stating the obvious. But for example, there I've got the ID of Mustine name. That's the name of this particular entity. So I could style that particular field different to any other text inputs by using that ID. But likewise, I could buy the title and for different areas, but it would make more sense to go to a different template. So in my example with the Portal Web API, I needed to be able to send the GUID of this track because I needed to set a lookup based on that. So what I've got, I've given myself some helpers behind the scenes. So you'll see as part of that table cell, I've given myself some clues. So this is the Mustine name field. The value being lasting lover. I've given myself that clue because I wanted a way of naming that particular like record that's created. So for example, I wanted to give the title Franco Musso liked lasting lover. In the next field, I've got a data attribute telling me the release done date, a file they created on. So they allow me to pull things in with jQuery, with JavaScript. They allow me to style things using CSS, and just all round helpful really. So even if you're just using entity forms, entity lists, web forms, you'll see when those templates have been built, some real careful time and effort's gone into that. Like I'm afraid I've not got an example on my portal, but within your entity list, for each row it'll tell you the GUID of that particular record. For each cell, it'll have done the hard work of telling you what is the field name within Dynamics, what is the numeric value if that's applicable for things like option sets, as well as what's the label. So all kinds of useful helpers there. And to pinpoint any of that, so like for example, if I wanted to pinpoint a table cell and it's got a value of lasting lover, what I do is use my usual CSS selectors. So like for example, TD to get a table cell, and then some square brackets and the name of my my data attribute. So maybe I'm looking for the TD that's got a data value equal to lasting lover. So not the best example by any means, but you see that allows me to very specifically pinpoint that record versus just all elements of that type on the page. So in other portals that I built, we've got an inbox solution. I've used that, for example, to pinpoint the selected record. So I choose a record from my inbox, it displays that on an entity form, but I want to show in my navigation which record it is that's selected that I'm showing on screen. So that again, I can do with those selectors. Okay, well, would that be a good time to get to questions? Happy to show any of the behind the scenes whatsoever, whether that's Power Automate, the web API, snoop through the web templates, anything at all.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I do have some bad news for you though. I think you might be a programmer. You keep saying you're not a programmer, but from what I'm seeing, I think you might be. So I'm sorry to have to break that to you.
Well, I absolutely would love to be. I'd love to be able to call myself that. I'm not precious about being a citizen developer. I've seen many times I don't have that MVC way of looking at things. And so all my CSS, for example, is very specific to each page. All my JavaScript is specific to each page. I'd love that mindset that just allows me to think of things in like an object-oriented way of doing things. Which is strange. It does very much when it comes to modeling data in Dynamics, but not when it comes to any coding whatsoever.
So what's next? What's version 2 of this?
Well, like any labor of love, good question, but like any labor of love, it's never going to be finished because it's just going to accommodate the next thing that I need to learn on portals or the next thing that I need to teach colleagues on a portal. So usually part of I'm a contract functional consultant, so every 3 months or so we're launching a new portal, a new project, and I'm upskilling their internal team. Sometimes they're purely programmers with no web design chops. Sometimes they're absolutely excellent front-end web developers, but with no knowledge of Dynamics or of Power Apps portals. So there's always some new challenges, some new interesting way of looking at things. But I've put a bit of a roadmap together. So the first big change recently, which I've implemented some of it, as you've seen, is replacing what I'd cobbled together with Power Automate using some tricks from Nick Dolman and Ajax with directly using the Portal Web API. And then this is what I think would take us to something like feature complete. So some admin dashboards, so from a record label point of view, what are the popular tracks, which artists are trending, what's been listened to most recently. To do some lazy loading of all those images, and again, from a performance point of view, I've only got something like 20 tracks in the database at the moment. Clearly, if I had hundreds of thousands or millions of tracks, I certainly wouldn't show them in one view, but if I did, I at least want to load each image only as and when required. I've implemented global search on a couple of other portal projects, but not on this one. So I've tried and failed to pick apart the faceted search template. So that I'd like to do a great job of on this. So I got as far as making artists, playlists, albums searchable, but not able to make the results look particularly fancy or in keeping with the rest of the portal. So that is definitely a high priority. Page transitions, I think that's transitions quite an easy rabbit hole to get stuck down. I find them fascinating. I really like what they add to the user experience, so that I'd like to add into them. And I've cheated a little bit where I've got playlists. So these are just one combined image. That's not 4 thumbnails together. So I was thinking with Power Automate and UI flows, perhaps I did try and avoid Photoshop for this project, but maybe that's one area where I could use it, where I get UI flow to pull the first or last 4 images from that particular playlist and put them together in a collage, save that thumbnail. Playlist creation experience. So I'm going to get an endless list of inspiration from Spotify, I guess, because every time I log in, pretty much there's a refresh to the user interface and it looks and feels even better and even further ahead of what I've done. But I'd like to be able to have a much more visual experience for adding and editing playlists and be able to drag and drop to change the order of the tracks, for example. Better mobile styling. So in all honesty, this does break at certain points. So with web forms and what have you, that's not too bad. They scale quite well. But if I, for example, maybe if I sign out, so yeah, in fact, already that menu is looking awful. I've not put any effort into mobile just yet. Oh, and I've not put a logout URL into ADB to see. Need to revisit your video, I think, Nick. Yeah, so it's not the best experience on mobile. That's somewhere to revisit. And then again, from a performance point of view, maybe look at using CDNs for loading those images rather than get everything from Dynamics. So maybe use that Portal Web API, get the note attachment into Dynamics, and then fire it off somewhere completely different. Either smush that image and bring it back to Dynamics, or leave it in the ether somewhere. So I did consider using the WP content folder on my 2B WordPress website. Sorry, you probably wish you didn't ask the question. Quite the laundry list. But I'd like to log listens as well, so that's not something I'm doing at the moment. I can see who's visiting a page, but I can't see who's who's actually listening to a track. I think it'd be useful to, from a popularity point of view, a trend point of view, who's listening to what. I'll not bore everyone with everything that I've got in mind, but graphic equalizer, a lyrics plugin, I believe those are both things that existing jQuery plugins, so it's just a matter of implementing those ratings rather than just likes. And automating recommendations, perhaps with something like Power Automate. So you like this track that's in this genre with this BPM, maybe it's by this artist. Here's some other things that you likely enjoy. And a heck of a lot more that I couldn't fit onto a slide. Any more questions? Absolutely happy to take them.
Yeah, Megan wants to know what element you enjoyed figuring out the most and what was the most frustrating.
I'd say the most frustrating, good question, is my memory. So I still, even though I think some of the bits of JavaScript I've done on the portal are quite advanced, I still end up Googling every time I want to add a document ready event, every time I want to add an on-click event, and every time I want to check that an entity list is loaded. So I blame that in part on don't repeat yourself and relying on content snippets. But yeah, the fact that I can't actually remember the syntax for a document.ready is quite frustrating. I think the bit I enjoyed most was it's the geeky things really. So in my overall portal experience, it was absolutely learning FetchXML and looping. But from the portal perspective and the styling perspective, it's the silly things like filters and blurring, changing things to grayscale, and layering, in fact. So probably seem very basic to anyone that's well skilled in CSS, but just being able to combine these two gradients. So there's the black fading into transparent, and in the background there's blue fading into purple. Before this project, I wouldn't have actually had any idea that I could combine those two, or if I could, sorry, if it was possible, how you would do that.
Megan just said that that's why you write blog posts about stuff, so that you can, when you forget about it, you Google it and you go back. And I hear that a lot, and you know, it's funny, it happens all the time. Like whether it's forum posts that I've done or blog posts, like half the time you forget that you've already solved this problem once. So the best way to document it is put it up for the world to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're at the top of the hour here. We've got a couple more questions. Do you have a few more minutes for us to finish these questions up?
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so Omar wants to know the grids that we saw, are they custom grids that use Web API or out of the box like entity lists, or how do those work?
Great question. They're web templates with some Bootstrap and some CSS.
Okay. Henrique wants to know approximately how much time did it take you to build this? Do you have a guess?
I would rather go with how long it took to build 90% of it, which was next to no time, and probably a day or two, and then the last 10% all of this year, every bit of spare time between projects, because there's always some nagging thing that you picture as being the cherry on top of the cake, and actually ends up eating up half of your life. So yeah, to get the structure of it, the liquids, the custom templates, the data model, all of that within a couple of days, and then actually getting it to look like something a human would want to consume was the rest of the time.
Right.
But I think if I had the benefit of someone skilled and experienced with CSS, they probably make very light work with that.
Right. Another question here from Henrique. I have the feeling that entity forms were lightly used as opposed to Portal's web API. Is that right? Well, I mean, I think I saw a few entity forms, and there was a web form. And so what percentage of the forms would you say that used actual entity or web forms versus having to use web API?
Well, in fact, the only area that I've used The web APIs really was where I couldn't have the form. So like, for example, to dislike a song, so just go back to someone that's got some likes.
And while you get there, there's a question about licensing, basically saying from a licensing point of view, would it not be too expensive to start a Powerhouse portals with thousands of millions of potential users? You're probably not wrong.
No,
Although I think if you had thousands or millions of users, you could probably get some sort of volume discount. So
yeah, I would definitely be charging a subscription. So yeah, in this example, using the portal web API, it didn't feel like, although I could have used an entity form to achieve the same end result, to dislike a song didn't feel like something you would want to take 3-4 clicks to do. So that's using the portal web API to just take that GUID and send a delete request. So it depends on the use case, really. Creating a playlist, absolutely just a standard web form. So web form step with just one field on it there, creates a record, and then add the subgrid where I could add tracks to it. And then because it was, as I understood it, quite a unique challenge to get the tracks uploaded.
all right. I think that's the end of the questions here. I'm going to just steal the presenter thing here quickly from you. Thank you so much. I mean, that was fantastic. I'd heard rumors. I hadn't actually kind of seen it in nearly this much detail. So, I mean, that's great work. Thank you for sharing with us today. I just want to quickly mention that the next call we've got here scheduled is January, so January 21st at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. UTC time. Thanks again for everyone for showing up. Thank you again to Franco for that fantastic presentation. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Good luck with the Scotch Summit, and hope to see you all next month. And have a great holiday season, everyone. And we'll see you in the new year.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you so much, Franco, for joining us. Hope to see more of this in the future. We'll end it there, everyone. Bye.
Okay, so thanks everyone.